Before we begin, we have a favor to ask. Tony and I think we know what you like, but we could be clueless. Help us keep you entertained and informed by taking our brief listener survey. It's quick and helps us figure out what you're loving, what you'd like to hear more of, and how we can make the podcast even better. The link is in the show notes, and you can do it right now while you're listening to this episode.
So gentlemen prefer blondes, do they? Yes, they do.
Listen, Sally, I made up my mind a long time ago. I'm not going to spend my whole life on the wrong side of the railroad tracks.
Well, I hope you don't get hit by a train while you're crossing over.
You know, I surprised your uncle once, and it gave me enough material to blackmail him for 10 years.
Aunt, don't be so cynical. You won't have him long. You caught him with sex, but sex isn't the only thing in life, and it doesn't last forever. And when it's gone, you'll lose him, because then he'll want love, and love is one thing you don't know anything about and never will.
Give me that key.
Oh, you're afraid. You're afraid of yourself because you know you love me.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, you're afraid you're going to take me in your arms. You're afraid you're going to kiss me.
Is that so?
Well, why don't you do it?
Keep away from me, I'm warning you.
Why don't you do it?
Keep away from me.
You don't dare stay here. You don't trust yourself. Oh, do it again. I like it. Do it again.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
I wish you'd try to understand this, would you?
I might have understood if it hadn't been a girl like that.
So, Brad, right off the top, I have a quiz for you.
Okay. I love
ready?
quizzes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Pencils down. Pencils down. What movie does this movie that we're going to be talking about today remind you of?
Oh, that's not a quiz. That's ridiculously easy because I thought about through this entire film. I can't remember which one came first. Either this is the remake of Babyface or Babyface was the remake of this. It was so similar in every way.
Well, it wasn't a remake because there was only Babyface was 33 and this was 32.
Okay. No, it wasn't a remake, but they're very similar.
But yeah, so that was a pretty easy. I wanted to start you off easy with this because we are indeed talking about Babyface. See, I just did it. We are indeed talking about Red-Headed Woman today. It was a listener request from Megan, who actually requested this just last week. We read it, and here we are already. Instant gratification here, Megan. From MGM in 1932, and the reason I was giving that quiz to Brad was because last season, 2 seasons ago, our very first year, one of our earliest episodes, we talked about, the poster child for Pre-Code, which is Babyface. And the entire time I'm rewatching Red-Headed Woman, I'm thinking, my God, it's Babyface. The plot is so similar, it's almost plagiaristic. I'm telling you right now.
It really is, right down to, in Babyface, you had the father-in-law trying to help the son-in-law, whereas this, you had the father trying to help the son against the, it's never the man's fault. It's always
right.
Her charm that makes men unable to resist themselves, as it's always been through history. So I got a kick out of it. It's the same thing.
It's so similar. Here's some of the similarities I found when I was watching it this time. Did you notice this? So both characters in Babyface and Red-Headed Woman are named Lillian. They have the same name. It's Lily in Babyface, and it's Lil in Red-Headed Woman. So I'm like, there is no attempt here to disguise anything. And Daryl Zanuck, who wrote Babyface at Warner Brothers the following year using a nom de plume, I was like, Daryl Zanuck, what the hell? This is almost, the same name. They both start out in small towns. Now in Babyface, it's Erie, Pennsylvania. In Red-Headed Woman, it's a small town in Ohio. So hello. They both end up in Paris. There are some big differences, though, and I think that we'll obviously talk about that when we get into it, but I just found it striking that Babyface was kind of the Warner Brothers version of Red-Headed Woman. Red-Headed Woman was first, and then Babyface. But whereas Babyface, it was a quickie, a cheapie made in less than 3 weeks. MGM didn't really make cheapies, okay? They made B-level films. They made B films, but even their B films were A films for the best studios. I mean, for other studios, their B films would be considered A films. So this is not a quickie. This is MGM put money into this movie. But I just think it's so amazing that the plots are so similar and nobody really said anything. At least I don't think so.
I don't remember how much it cost to make Babyface, but this one clearly had a bigger budget. It was obvious from the sets and everything else. I have a couple questions. One, this one was based on a novel by Catherine Bush. Was Babyface based on a novel, or did they just steal from the novel and not give her credit?
It was an original story by Darryl F. Zanuck.
He just stole the story and didn't
basically. The name he used for Babyface was Mark Canfield. So in the credits of Babyface, it says original story, air quotes original story, by Mark Canfield. It's basically redheaded woman with Barbara Stanwyck instead of, and I mean, there are some similarities. Babyface, as we said, and if anybody wants, I don't want to go too much into Babyface, just go back into our history, and it's like our 3rd or 4th episode of the series.
A very fun movie.
Babyface, a lot of fun, really, really, really pushes the envelope, much more than Redheaded Woman does. But still, they're both pretty risque films and pretty salacious films, and one of the reasons why, the Legion of Decency and the Production Code Administration and the censors and the religious groups and the women's groups all got up in arms about these films that later ended up causing the code to be strictly enforced in 1934.
Yeah, Lil was quite the shameless hussy trying to get ahead through her body, we should say.
But what's delicious about Redheaded Woman, and thank you, Megan, for suggesting Redheaded Woman. What's delicious about Redheaded Woman, I feel, is our star, is the incomparable Jean Harlow. Now, we talked about Babyface being kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge as far as Barbara Stanwyck's attitude. Like she looking at the audience going, I can't believe this shit either, but just stay around because it's so out there. But, I mean, Redheaded Woman was purposely designed as a comedy, a interesting comedy, not like a bringing up baby, not a screwball, but it does have a humorous tone for a very, very good reason. Do you want to venture a guess as to why that is, Brad? Why it was given a humorous tilt, if you will?
First, I want to say that's interesting because I thought maybe it was just me that was getting a kick out of it. I didn't know it was intentional. My belief is that softens the blow and makes it a little
right.
So it passes the studio heads and that sort of thing easier.
Yeah, because the original, did you know this? On this film, one of the original writers on this film was none other than F. Scott Fitzgerald. I mean, this is when he was writing for Hollywood films. Yeah,
and I know he did a lot of writing. I didn't know this one.
He did, and he was uncredited. He began working on this film, actually, turning the novel. It's based on a 1931 novel by Catherine Bush. And he was the first writer, I believe the first writer, to come on and turn this into a screenplay. But they knew they had to give this a humorous slant for it to get past the production code. It had a much better chance of getting past the PCA. Even though the PCA, the code was not being strictly enforced, there were still censorship boards, there were still laws in states against obscenity. They knew it would have a better chance for it to get passed if they gave it a humorous tone. That's why, and we'll get into the plot of the film, but that's why the film begins with those 2 brief scenes. Those were added. And do you want to tell the people a little bit about what those 2 scenes are, Brad, that begin the film?
Yeah, so the first thing you see in the film, and I wanted to look and see if this is in the book, and I didn't, because I seriously doubt that it is. I think this was for the audience. And you see Ms. Harlow sitting there. She just had a dye job, and she looks in the mirror and says, "So gentlemen prefer blondes, do they?" And she's a redhead. And like I said, my guess is that was for the audience, who all knew that she was really a blonde. Probably not in the novel.
It's twofold. It's because Harlow, even at this early point in her career, was known as the Platinum Blonde, because in every film she'd done before this, she was a platinum blonde. She had just done a film before this called Platinum Blonde. And secondly, because the second screenwriter brought on to work on this was none other than Anita Loos, whose most famous work was gentlemen prefer blondes. So right at the beginning, we're getting a wink, wink from, so gentlemen prefer blondes, do they? I'll say they do. And she's a redhead. So that's the first thing. That's your first little meta moment in this movie.
I didn't catch that.
Do you remember the second scene? The second scene that kind of sets this comedic tone when she's trying on the dress.
No, I just watched this movie.
So right after that, I'll say they do. And then it gets to another scene with Lil Andrews, Jean Harlow, trying on a dress, and she asks the salesperson, "Can you see through this?" And the salesperson says, "I'm afraid you can." And she says, "I'll wear it."
Yes, I thought that was spectacular. I love that, and I just am not getting the scenes in the right order. You had me going off to a different scene. I don't think that was the beginning. Yeah, both of those were precious. I loved them.
Sets the tone for the film that this is a funny movie. And those scenes were put in after, as I said, after the original screenplay was written. Those scenes were put in by Anita Loos to let audiences know, don't take this seriously, folks. This is a comedy.
The see-through dress line really set the tone, and I loved that. I can't even imagine the movie without it because it just jumped out. I did do one thing. I was curious about the novel and the film because of the time period, and we know that as a rule, films always got toned down. So I didn't go deep into the novel. I just wanted to find out what the differences were as far as what they got away with. And unlike After Code, the novel was more tame than the film.
Really?
She had consequences at the end of the novel. Here she gets away with everything, except I kind of feel like on the inside she was still empty. So I kind of had a moral ending to me. The novel apparently was more subtle and the sexual contact was more implied. Here it was pretty obvious. I mean, granted, the wife shows up, Chester Morris's wife shows up. Who is he? Bill Legrand? Legender. Okay.
It's a very American pronunciation of what I think probably is Legendre, but they call it Legender. Mr. Legender, yeah.
So, like the scene where Bill Legender's wife, Irene, she shows up at the house. We see the door closed for, seems like an hour, but it's probably about 10 seconds. And then Jean Harlow comes out, fully dressed. And then we cut back to the living room. And Chester Morris is standing there fully dressed in a suit. And I'm like, no. She didn't walk in on them. She walked on them. They were having sex.
Something was going on.
And then suddenly he's standing there in a suit. Did he get on a suit so they could have a discussion about what happened? So that I found hysterical. But if nothing else, maybe they weren't having sex. But he certainly wasn't sitting in there in a suit. But apparently in the novel, it was even tamer than that. It was very subtle about the sexual things. And it just showed me the difference between pre-Code, where they jazzed up the film, and when Code started, and they had to tone down the salaciousness.
Yeah, so basically what Redheaded Woman is about is Jean Harlow plays an ambitious gold digger who manipulates her way into high society. Now, I read that description and I'm like, okay, well, like in Babyface, she does a little bit more than manipulate here. You know what I mean? Not quite as blatant as Babyface, but she basically, and I'm using this euphemistically, sleeps her way up the social ladder. And it's, the thing about these pre-codes is these type of characters like Lil Andrews, like Lily Powers in Babyface, they're kind of the female answer to the gangster film. Because on the one hand, you had, this was the Depression. Times were tough. Americans were looking for a way to better themselves. So on the one hand, on the male end, you had the gangster who was breaking laws and doing immoral things in order to get ahead. And on the female end, you had what the females had, which was the power of their sexuality to get ahead. So these were very popular characters during the pre-code era, and needless to say, they all went bye-bye once the code was enforced in July of 1934. But Brad, before we go any further, should we introduce these characters that are in this film?
So, of course, we have our lead, Jean Harlow, as Lil Andrews. And as she described herself, she is from the other side of the tracks. She is cunning, ambitious, a redhead stenographer, at least artificial redhead.
Yeah.
And she lets her friend know, and I have to think about her friends, is it Sally?
Yes, Sally.
That she is going to climb the social ladder. And she does it through manipulation, as she says. Not subtle manipulation, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no prelude to this. She starts, she's on her way. We get in on the ground floor with her. You know, we don't care about her backstory. She's got her mission, and she's going from the first reel of this film.
Yeah, if this is a fun film, but if you're looking for character development, move on. There's none. The only thing we know about Lil from beginning to end is she wants to climb the social ladder. That's pretty much her personality.
As we say all the time, this is not Ingmar Bergman and Death Playing Chess. This is a pre-code film from 1932.
No, not at all. Then we have Bill, played by Chester Morris, and he is the main target throughout the movie. He's wealthy. He's married to his loving wife, Irene. He's an executive, son of the company owner, and she destroys his marriage and then continues to destroy his wife throughout the film, or at least tries to. Then we have Irene, and, you know, I always have to put my head in the space of the time periods because I just like, she's being way too kind to Bill and his philandering ways and that sort of thing. But she is the wife who divorces her husband. Am I right? She moved across the street?
Yeah, well, you know, small town.
Odd arranged. I could see if they had children. I just found that very strange. But it's a small town. You know, the wealthy area is probably a block. And then I
want to say played by Layla Hyams.
Oh, Layla Hyams, yes. And then we had Lewis Stone, played William, how did they pronounce the name again?
Legender. Just think of
Legender.
It's as American as you can get. Legender.
Legend instead of Legendre.
Yeah, exactly.
Also known as Old Man. He is Bill's father and the company owner. His whole role is to be stodgy and trying to smooth things over. That's pretty much what his job is.
What Lewis Stone usually did in the films.
Yeah. Sally was played by Una Merkel. She was Jean Harlow's sounding board mainly so we can know what Jean Harlow was all about. Basically telling her what she was doing each step. And then we have Henry Stevenson as Gertie. Is that his last name?
Gersty.
I can never get his name right. He is a wealthy older businessman who does business with Legender, whatever that name is. I can't say it. He is like their main client, I guess you could say. They do a lot of business with this guy. He becomes Lil's next target.
Yeah.
Much older man. He is incredibly huge, or Chester Morris is incredibly small. And maybe it's a combination of the two.
Both. Chester Morris was not a big guy. He wasn't a big guy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It looked like Yogi and Boo Boo when they were standing there facing each other. I was like, wow, you would not see that today. One of them would be on a box or on their knees. One of the two. Then we had May Robeson. I was so excited to see her play Mrs. Russell.
Yeah, we love May Robeson. Any movie with May Robeson in it is going to be a fun little moment with May Robeson.
And I had to look her up a little bit because I wanted to know her background a little more because she comes up so often in our movies. And she always seems to play a society woman, or most of the time. And I thought it was very funny. This was only her second talkie.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that, I think it was in 1912, she was in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and she played a prostitute. And I just got a big laugh out of that because we don't tend to see her as a prostitute in these later films. For obvious reasons, she's older, but she just plays a whole different character. She might be a fun-loving society woman, but she's always seems to be a society woman.
Well, it's funny you should say that because, yeah, she was a society woman in Bringing Up Baby. She plays Katharine Hepburn's aunt, Elizabeth, in Bringing Up Baby. She was also in A Star is Born. Remember, she played the grandmother in the very first A Star is Born.
Yes.
But she's probably most famous as Apple Annie in the very first Lady for a Day. But she's a staple of pre-code. She's a staple of 30s films. She's a wonderful, wonderful comic supporting actress.
Now, wait a minute. You said Lady for a Day. Is this the first movie from Pocketful of Miracles? The Betty Davis film?
Yeah, that was remade as Pocketful of Miracles with Betty as Apple Annie.
I had no idea. I love Pocket Full of Miracles. I don't think it was pretty slow, and I don't think it was really well done, but I still love the premise so much. I love that movie. Now I have to go back and watch this one.
Watch Lady for a Day, Frank Capra. It's a wonderful film. Wonderful film. She got an Oscar nomination for it.
I look forward to it. Those are the main characters, unless I'm missing somebody.
Well, there's somebody that you missed that comes in at the very end, and I'm only going to mention him because it's a very small part, but not a very small actor. And that was the part of the chauffeur.
Ah, yes.
Did you recognize that actor, Brad?
By face. But no, I didn't remember him.
It was none other than Charles Boyer himself.
Oh, my God.
Charles Boyer, in one of his very first American films, playing Albert the chauffeur, who has a hand in the end of this film. But it's interesting because, Boyer was a French movie star, and, his very first job in the United States, he was brought over to MGM. MGM brought him over to do the French version of Chester Morris's character in The Big House. Because in early talkies, the studios would frequently make multi-language versions of their movies. For example, Anna Christie, you had the English language version of Anna Christie, but there was also a German language version. And frequently these, unless you had a star who was multilingual, or they spelled out phonetically for Buster Keaton, you can imagine they would actually shoot 2 or 3 versions of a film. So they were filming The Big House during the day with Chester Morris and Robert Montgomery and Wallace Beery, and then at night, the French cast came in and did the French version. And they did this for a few years until some genius at the studio realized, why don't we just use subtitles? And then we don't have to make 2 or 3 versions of the same frickin' movie.
See, this is why you're the film historian. I never knew any of that.
Crazy.
That is really crazy.
Buster Keaton made his first talkie. They made a Spanish version of it. It was called Free and Easy. And because he was Buster Keaton and nobody really could do what Buster Keaton did, he had to do the Spanish version, and he did it phonetically. Now, can you imagine? He had to do an entire film in Spanish phonetically. So
wow.
Thank God that some genius finally figured out, let's just use subtitles, and that way we don't have to have all these things. So yeah, that's the cast of this opus.
I want to make a comment about Charles Boyer, but first, something I got to get out before I forget to mention, and I'm sure I wouldn't have. I could not get over this whole film how absolutely handsome Chester Morris is.
Do you think so?
I thought so. I thought his hairstyle was awful, but it fit the era. But I kept thinking and looking at him.
Okay.
You know what I kept thinking? This is, I got to think of his name. Who's the guy that's married to Scarlett Johansson?
Oh, from Saturday Night Live.
What's his name? Colin Jost. Colin Jost. And 1 second to me, he looked like Ray Liotta. And the next second, usually from the profile, he looked like Colin Jost. And I don't know why. I find both of those men attractive in different ways. And I just kept looking at Chester Morris. I kept thinking he is a really handsome guy.
Do you think so? See, my feelings about Chester Morris is it looks like somebody hit him in the face with a frying pan. It looks like he walked into a wall because he's got a very interesting profile, but it's totally flat. And that's so funny because I was watching this with my friend John, and John also had the same reaction. And I was like, really? Chester Morris? Really? I don't get that. But the thing about Chester Morris is, and this is really important, see, when MGM went from silent film to sound films, they lost a lot of their big male stars because, and I'm not going to go into what happened in the transition, but they just did. Some spoke foreign, some their voices didn't fit their persona. They had very few male stars, a lot of female stars. So their strong male stars were Robert Montgomery and Chester Morris. And Chester Morris is really the pre-Gable Clark Gable. Once Clark Gable came into the fore, which was this year, by the way, 31-32, Chester Morris, bye-bye. Because you see, oh, well, no, this is who we really need. Because Chester Morris usually he plays more of a sensitive man in this, but he's usually a very male, very macho actor. And MGM did not have a lot of those in the early sound era. So this was actually Chester Morris's last big film. After this, since Gable came forward, they're like, no, we want that guy. He kind of went to the wayside, unfortunately. He's a good actor, for early talkies, but I don't have the oof feeling for Chester Morris as other people do.
No, I found him very handsome. As far as acting goes, I felt like it left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
But in general, and I think maybe it's because of the era, I felt more like I was watching a silent film that was dubbed because it had a very silent film feel to it. And I think that's a lot of why there wasn't a lot of character development. I felt like I was watching a fun story, but clearly wasn't a very deep film.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of, as we said, I mean, this is early talkies, so there's not a lot. There were some films, but they were just happy to get this film made and get it done quickly and get it out and make some money, because this was also 32, which is the deepest part of the Depression. And although MGM didn't feel it, all the other studios were feeling it. So they wanted to get as much money out of these films as they could. That's why they this one is not a cheapie. As we said, you can really see the production values in this film. MGM did not make cheapies. Even their lowest budget films had a gloss and a glamour that the other studios didn't. But you can still see, this doesn't have the production values of Gone with the Wind. This doesn't have the production values of the later 30s films. This is a very standard film, very, very standard melodrama with a touch of comedy in it.
Yeah, because I showed the budget at $300,000, which to me, 1932, that seems like a lot of money, if that's accurate. Mm-hmm. Now, I never 100% trust movies this old, the numbers to be accurate, because they weren't as accountable back then as they are now. But that's the number I came up with. And the sets were very nice. In fact, one thing that caught me off guard, I felt like Lil and Sally's apartment was awfully nice, and their clothes were awfully nice for two women from the other side of the tracks. But it's because the sets were so well done.
Well, because it was MGM. Everybody, even the poorest of people at MGM had very nice clothing. And you notice the streets, it reminds me of the Gilded Age. The streets are so clean, in these MGM films. That was MGM. That's what MGM did. This film was shot on location in Culver City, and everything was just MGM pristine. MGM pristine.
Okay, so I got to make the comment about Charles Boyer.
Okay.
I'm really embarrassed that you told me that it was him, because as I'm watching the character, I'm listening, I'm like, okay, is this guy French, or did they find someone to do a French accent? And I couldn't decide. The movie ended, I wasn't sure. Well, now I know.
It was Charles Boyer. It was Mr. Boyer. So that's really, come on, that's fantastic, right? And a very handsome young Charles Boyer.
Yes.
So before we get into the background, and also, I can't not talk about this film. It's called Red-Headed Woman, and not talk about our star, Jean Harlow. Do you want to give the briefest of scenarios of what happens in this film?
Very easy. As we said, Lil is a gold digger. She is a stenographer at Bill's office. And she seduces him at his home, and his wife walks in. This eventually leads to their divorce after she seduces him again. From the very beginning, her only goal is to climb the social ladder. That's all we know about this individual.
That's it.
She says she's from across the tracks. That's all we know of her backstory, and she's climbing the social ladder. So he gets divorced. She marries him. And a lot of the conflict in the film, for what it is, and I'm saying these things because I think there's a lot wrong with this film, and it doesn't imply whether I liked it or not. We'll get to that, Megan.
Oh, Lord. That's right. We haven't covered that yet.
No. So that does conflict, that people aren't accepting her. For one thing, that Bill, his ex-wife, Irene, is beloved by the community, is a small town, and they know that this woman is a gold digger, and they know her backstory. So that's a lot of the conflict. And so even though she gets where she wants to be, she's not really where she wants to be, and so she's not happy. And that kind of at the end is why I feel like in my own internal thing, she looks happy at the end, but I still kind of feel like internally she's probably still a miserable person.
Well, what's interesting about the character of Lil Andrews is, you're right, there's nothing, even in Babyface, we've kind of got a motivation for Barbara Stanwyck's actions.
Yes.
We don't. We just know this woman is from the wrong side of the tracks, and she's going to get on the right side of the tracks, and she's going to sleep with whoever she has to sleep with, and obviously I mean that euphemistically, to get where she wants to go. And
she's going to fuck every man she can to get to the top.
She's going to fuck any man she can to get where she wants to go. And Chester Morris plays her boss, yes, and I think it's so funny. So as we said before, if this film was to be presented dramatically as it was originally written, it probably wouldn't have gotten past the PCA. Even though the code wasn't being enforced that strongly, it was still being enforced. There were still censors. There were still censors in states. There were still laws. So they had to make it a little funnier. And some of the funnier moments in this scene. So when she grabs Chester Morris's mail and is going to deliver it to his house to do some after-hours dictation, if you will. And one of my favorite things is when she finally gets along with Chester Morris, she says to him, "Why, Mr. Legender, you're all I've been able to think about for years." And he says, "You've only been working in the office for 2 months." It's this kind of thing. It's this kind of ridiculous thing. And she seduces him. His wife finds out. She keeps seducing him. They get very physical. She keeps chasing after him. She gets drunk. She goes after him. He gets physical with her. I wanted to ask you about that, Brad. There's more than one scene where he bats her around. And we're supposed to think this is, I don't know, titillating. We're supposed to think this is because she takes it and she wants more. She even says, after he slaps her, she even says, "Do it again. I like it."
Yes, I loved that line, and it made me laugh. And I don't know if they were doing that. They felt the audience felt like she deserved it and would make them happy, or if there was a sexual aspect to it. I think it was probably sex.
Well, both. I think a little bit of both. This character, this character, the character of Lil, how it works is because of Jean Harlow, Lil comes across as mischievous rather than calculating or mercenary because of the humor Harlow puts into it. But that being said, there is some violence in this movie. He does batter her around, smacks her, and then she locks him in her bedroom with Una Merkel outside, and she's listening to him batting her around, and she's laying on the floor. But she's locked him in the room, so he picks her up, carries her to the bed, and she's standing there, she's laying there crying, shaking, and he says, "Give me the key so he can get out." And she takes the key and she puts it down her dress. So, yeah. So I don't know what they're saying about violence and sexuality here. It's 1932. It's pre-code. You just got to go with it. That's the way it is.
We'll have to presume there was a safe word in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So eventually they get married. But again, another Gilded Age thing. Like in the Gilded Age, she's not being allowed into high society. She's a gold digger and it's new money. So she realizes the only way that she can get into high society and get acceptance in high society is if she sleeps with someone else. And this is this big shot in Cole that we talked about earlier, Mr. Gersty, played by Henry Stevenson. So she ends up sleeping with him in order to blackmail him into getting her into high society. Still doesn't work. She leaves. She goes after him in New York, where she then carries on an affair with Mr. Gersty, who's much older than she is, while she's sleeping with his chauffeur at the same time. And that's when Chester Morris comes to town, he's been having her tailed by a private eye, who's been taking photos. And another very humorous thing is when he shows the photos.
Oh, those are awesome.
Go ahead. You tell people about it.
The photos show her and the chauffeur, Charles Boyer, kissing each other and frequently, literally behind the man's back.
It's so funny.
At one point, he's tying his shoes.
He's tying his shoe.
And they're behind him kissing. And it's actually hysterical.
He's tying his shoe with his back to them, and they are kissing, and he has photographs of this. It's so funny. I
have to go back to her seducing Bill at his home when she brought the work home for him to sign or go over whatever. Her legs, throughout this film, every time he tried to push himself away, he saw her leg. This was a leg man.
Yes.
He would see her legs and he was jelly. Just boom. He couldn't control himself. But what was hysterical to me is she's talking about that she has loved him from afar for years. And she shows that she has a locket with his picture on it strapped to her leg under her dress. Now, any smart person at that point would have said, "I got to get the fuck out of here." because this person's nuts. But of course he doesn't, because he's, you know why? He's blinded by her legs.
Well, just like, yeah, as in Babyface, you know, she's kryptonite to these men. But you know what? It's Jean Harlow, so I can kind of see that a lot. I love Barbara Stanwyck, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of it's ludicrous in Babyface how these men, how these titans of industry are jelly in the hands of Barbara Stanwyck. With Jean Harlow, I can see it a lot more. I can see it, but it is. She's so blatant. She's so funny. When that scene when Chester Morris comes to New York to confront Kirsty about their affair, and he has the photos of her cheating with the chauffeur, and Kirsty's just so upset, and he asks Chester Morris, "When did this begin?" And Morris said, "Well, she arrived on the 16th," and Kirsty says, "Yes. Well, the 16th." It's this comic tone that makes it so palpable, makes it more palatable for people, and what got it past the Production Code Administration. Because she's a homewrecker, this character. You know what I mean? She's a homewrecker. But one of the most important things to point out about this film is at the very end, even though she's basically destroyed some lives here and attempted to kill Chester Morris by shooting him, she gets off as an accident. I don't know how. She shoots him after she points right at his car.
Yes.
She does not get punished. In the end, as in Babyface, she's in Paris, married to a much older gentleman who you know she is also taking for a ride. And guess who's her chauffeur? It's Albert. It is Charles Boyer. I love that ending. It's so funny because remember when we talked about Babyface, how they had to tack on the ending of Babyface to show the board of directors saying that Lily Powers basically paid for her sins? She's now a good woman. Not a redheaded woman. In Redheaded Woman, no. Jean Harlow is living high in the hog in Paris, and that's just fine.
And the way they did it was so fun because you see her in the back of the car with this older man, very scraggly older man, and then it starts to pan out. And that's what the fun part was. It pans out to where you can see the driver, and lo and behold, no surprise, it's Charles Boyer.
It's a great ending. It's a great film. It's a lot of fun. Before I go into talking about Jean Harlow, which I think we need to talk about because this is basically the film that really established Jean Harlow as the huge icon of classic film. What did you think of this movie, Brad? You kind of teased about it before, so I got to say, hey, Megan, you brought this on. What did you think of it, Brad?
I equally loved it and I hated it. I can't say I hated it. I equally loved it and disliked it. And it depended on where I put my brain at any given moment. When I allowed myself to just have fun, I laughed. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed its cheesiness for what it is. Every time I tried to get to know a character and want to know more about them, that's when I would get really disappointed. Jean Harlow aside, I didn't feel like the acting was all that great, but I also didn't feel like, other than the lines, they didn't really have a lot to do with them because, again, there wasn't a lot of depth to these characters.
Yeah, well.
Okay. Even Jean Harlow, I wish I felt like she could have really shined more if they made it a deeper film. And I'm not saying that made it good or bad. It just was, I watched part of it and then I had to stop and have lunch, and then I came back and watched it some more. And I had different feelings each time. So I liked it, but I certainly won't say it's a great. I'm really surprised how well it does in as far as the reviews, the critics, and that sort of thing. And I think that is mostly because of the time and what it represents. And I will say, from a historical standpoint and that sort of thing, I think it's a great film, an important film. I think it's a fun film when you think of the era, but a great film in general, nah, just fun.
You have to reset your standards. You have to reset your benchmarks because, again, this is 1932. There's not a lot of character development in this. That's not how this film was designed. This film was designed as a good time and as a comedy, shot through a comedic lens. I hesitate to call it a comedy because, as I said, she attempts murder. She's a homewrecker. But she makes it palatable because they present it in a comic tone sometimes, and because it's Jean Harlow. And I think what's important to point out about this is that this redheaded woman was really a turning point in Harlow's career. Because by 32, she was very famous, but she was mostly famous for being not very good or for being a very stiff kind of mannequin type actress, because nobody had really tapped into her genuine gift. And her genuine gift, she's known as the happy pagan, because her genuine gift was this kind of film. The funny, sexual, just a happy pagan. It's the best way to say it. And she's a woman, especially in these pre-code films, who is not ashamed of her sexuality and has fun with it. And that's what's so great about Harlow, is that everything comes with a wink and a nudge with Harlow. We haven't talked about Dinner at 8, but Dinner at 8, very much the same. She's the happy pagan. She's the happy, she's a happy hooker, if you will. And that was the fun of Harlow. And it's so amazing because, she really came to everybody's attention through Hell's Angels, which was the 1930 Howard Hughes film, which really put her on the map. And then she did Public Enemy with Jimmy Cagney but she's very stiff and she's very mannered. And that's where the line, "let me slip into something more comfortable," comes from. She says it, but she says it so awkwardly and so stiffly that you really don't get that. You don't get, oh, wow, this is a great actress. You don't get it. And I'm not saying that she was a great actress. What I'm saying was that she was a great personality. And her career would have ended as this stiff, platinum blonde bombshell image that she had, except for producer Paul Byrne at MGM, who became her mentor and her husband. And there was a scandal which happened after this film, which I'll touch on briefly. But they saw something there. They saw something extra in Harlow that nobody had seen. A kind of just a lilt in her voice, a twinkle in her eye, which they thought, and this is what good producers do, there's something there. Let's find out about her if she can do this comedy. And that's it exactly. And once she did this and she revealed this wonderful comic gift she had to this, and she later did Red Dust, and she did Dinner at 8, playing this happy pagan, playing this comically sexually free woman. That was her persona up until the code came down. And then it changed a bit after the code came down, because she couldn't really be a happy pagan with, part of her persona she suddenly had to be re-virginalized, but she was still a fun, good time gal. That's just who Jean Harlow's character was. Not in real life, but that's who she was. So I think that's one of the reasons that people love this movie, is the fact that Jean Harlow makes it a hell of a lot of fun.
And I agree. I would say if it wasn't for her, I would just say generally this isn't a good film. And it's hard to imagine that they would say, let's find somebody that's known for being stiff for this particular role, because it is a fun role, and she does make it fun. I mean, I've always loved characters that have no redeeming qualities, and that is this character.
Yes.
They're
unrepentingly unredeeming.
Yes.
She is unrepentant.
They're fun to watch. That's why I like some of the modern gangster films. There's something that endears me to them if they're played well. And she plays this one well. I would like more depth, but it was fun to watch her. And she seemed like she was having a great time. That's actually the biggie. That's what made the film. You could tell she was having a damn good time.
Yeah. That's what makes it so enjoyable.
Yes.
And that's another reason. And another huge reason for Harlow's popularity is that people found her funny. So she was non-threatening. Women, just like we said about Marilyn, 30 years later when Marilyn was at her height, women loved Marilyn, men loved Marilyn. Well, they loved Marilyn because of her vulnerability. With Harlow, it was because she was funny, because she could make them laugh, and that was the key to her persona. So much so that, not long after this film, she had just started to film Red Dust in 1932 with Clark Gable, when her husband, Paul Byrne, was found dead. And for a long time, no one knew what happened. It was one of the big scandals of the 30s. And I don't want to go too much into it. There's lots of wonderful books and things about the Paul Byrne murder. But for a while, she was a suspect. They didn't know what happened. And because MGM got in there and, kind of whitewashed everything, it became a suicide. And later on, they discovered some evidence that was probably a former wife, actually, who killed him. But Harlow survived that scandal, which is what's so amazing. A scandal that would have killed anybody else, because audiences loved her so much, because she was such a fun character. And that's what's wonderful about Jean Harlow. Another wonderful thing about Jean Harlow, and a very famous thing about Jean Harlow, was that even at this point, She was known for her aversion to wearing underwear. The woman never wore underwear. And it was very well known. And so you remember that, do you remember the scene in this film where Una Merkel has her pajamas on?
Yes.
And she says, get out of those. But those are
Yes.
mine. Did you notice how the camera moved back and forth?
How could you not? It was really well done, especially given this time period. I'm like, oh my goodness. We are letting be known that this is a woman standing there naked right in front of the screen, but just a little off.
The way the camera moves back and forth, you don't see anything. But they are both basically naked. She takes off the top and the camera goes with the top and then it comes on. Jack Conway directed this film. Jack Conway was a journeyman director at MGM, did a lot of wonderful films. That's wonderful directing. That's what Pre-Code did. Pre-Code gave us, sometimes they were blatant about things, but there was also the allusions, the suggestions, the euphemisms that disappeared in 34 when the code came down, and it was very rare that they came up. But that's one of the wonderful things about Code was it was very sexy without being blatant in your face sexy.
Yeah, everybody in the audience knew that she was naked in that scene and could picture her, and I am certain that many a straight man left that film with very detailed of what he actually think he saw in the film, which was not there.
It was not there. It was not there. It was all in your mind, and that's what's so wonderful about this movie. I love this movie. I love this movie because of Jean Harlow. I don't think I'd be that interested in it if it wasn't Jean Harlow. I find she's just so, again, even though she's playing a reprehensible character, she's so much fucking fun.
Mm-hmm.
She's so much fun. You just want to, I don't know if I want to know her, but you just want to hang out with her for a bit and just have a drink with her and have a good laugh with her because she's just taking these people on a ride, and it's just so much fun to hang out with her for the hour and 20 minutes it takes for this film to unfold.
Yeah, very quick film.
A little bit about Harlow, because we haven't really talked about Harlow.
No.
And it's very important to talk about Harlow. I would love to do another Harlow film. Because I said after she did this, redheaded woman, it really kind of set her character as this happy pagan who enjoyed sex and was fun. But what's remarkable about Harlow is that she was such a natural comedian that even after the code came down in 34, she was actually able to shift her persona slightly. And she was just as big a star after the code came down in movies like Libeled Lady and China Seas and her final film, Saratoga, as she was in Pre-Code. So she was able to do it. She was actually able to ride that wave. Unfortunately, she died at age 26 of kidney failure. And I want to bust a myth here. I think it's out there. The famous myth is that she was kept from medical attention due to her mother's Christian Science beliefs, and that's not true. She fell ill on the set of the film Saratoga, which she was making with Clark Gable. It was their 6th film together. They were a great comic team. They complemented each other so well. And she was always attended by a doctor. She went home, and she was attended by a doctor the entire time. The problem was that she was misdiagnosed.
Oh.
She was misdiagnosed as having an inflamed gallbladder and influenza. And they didn't realize she was actually going into kidney failure and dying in front of their eyes. So by the time she got to the hospital, it was too late, and she slipped into a coma, and she died at age 26. She was 26 years old when she died in 1937. I mean, again, here we are, like Marilyn, like James Dean. These icons are frozen in time at the height of their fame and their beauty because they died young, which is so tragic.
Yeah.
And kind of wonderful at the same time.
Given the medical technology at that time, you could see that seems like almost like it would be an easy mistake without being able to get in and like they do now.
Yeah. Very sad. Very sad. But I just wanted to bust that myth because that's always been out there.
Yeah.
And no, she had medical attention. They just misdiagnosed her. They just didn't know what was going on. And unfortunately, it ended in her death, which was very tragic. She was very, very, very much loved by all of her colleagues. Nobody ever had a bad word to say about Jean Harlow, except maybe Joan Crawford, but we don't hold too much on that. That's just Joan. Gotta love her. But everybody loved Harlow to a T. Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, they called her Baby. That was her nickname from the time she was a child. And, the baby's gone at 26. So it's very sad. But also what is interesting about Harlow and Redhead Woman is, as you can imagine, though this film was a big hit, it was one of the films that really set the moralists, got their backs up, got them like, we cannot have these kinds of characters in films in front of our young people, in front of our impressionistic young people. So, even though the production code wasn't strictly enforced until 1934, Redheaded Woman played a big part in the code coming down because they couldn't put up with it, this kind of behavior.
Before we start talking about stats and everything else we have to talk about this film, let's get our usual out of the way. That first of all, we are still doing the survey. It's going to run for a couple of weeks. Please, we ask you to go to the link that's in the show notes, and it's a very brief survey, just a few questions. We'd love it if you can help us. We kind of feel like we know what you like. We know what we'd like. Let's see if we're on the same page. So just go there, click a couple of buttons. There's some boxes you can fill in if you want, and get those in ASAP. That would really help us out. Beyond that, the other ways you can help us is, as always, rate and review this podcast. Whatever app you're listening on, you can look right at it, and it says review or rate. Click that button and do so. We would really appreciate it. It lets others know that you enjoy the show. And we always love to hear from you. Again, in the show notes, you can send us a text or leave us a voicemail. Or the other way, boy, we're tossing out so many ways to reach us because we want to hear from you. You can email us at goinghollywoodpod@gmail.com.
Yes, absolutely. Do that. See, look, this is a request. We did it. It is truly instant gratification here, almost.
Yes. And we have more to come. We have scheduled. We have quite a few scheduled that were requested by individuals.
We have one coming up next, which was one that not only one person, not only two people, but I think three people requested.
At least three.
So we're going to do it. So this film did have a wonderful critical reception, actually. Do you have any of the stats on this film, Brad?
I do. As I said, it was made for about $300,000, and it grossed about $1.2 million. Now, remember, when we're talking about this era, these numbers you can't trust them 100%, but they're the best that we can get. So about $300,000 made $1.2 million. Not a drop in the bucket at that time period, that's for sure.
No, 32. Nope.
The critics and the audience loved Harlow. There were questions of whether it was a little too risque and if it was morally questionable, but everybody kind of admitted that they liked that at the same time. You know how that goes. Rotten Tomatoes, 91% critic score, which I surprises me, and I get it at the same time. I think story-wise, it doesn't deserve it from a historical standpoint and just being plain old fun. I get it. Audience score is not as high, 72%, which doesn't surprise me because I don't think audiences would appreciate it as much as a critic would from a historical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I just think people love this movie because it's so much fun.
It is.
And
yes,
it's just a hell of a lot of fun, And again, don't look for any deep moral lessons in this thing because there aren't any. If there is a moral lesson, it's crime does pay, and go ahead and sleep your way to the top. Go ahead. So there's no moral lessons. It's just a really good time. But what's wonderful, again, my favorite thing about this film is the fact that it brought Jean Harlow into the forefront as this really wonderful natural comedian, and over time she would really develop those skills and give us wonderful performances in Red Dust and Dinner at 8 and Libeled Lady, one of my very favorite Harlow films, just one of my very favorite films. And she was almost to the point where she was commenting on her own persona. She was able to kind of like deconstruct her persona and give these really funny, wonderful, self-aware performances. So if you don't know Jean Harlow, if you haven't seen a Jean Harlow film and you're a little worried about watching, I don't know why you would. Start with Redheaded Woman. I guarantee you, again, 115 minutes, or I'm sorry, an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. Totally worth it.
Yes.
Totally worth the investment. What else you got to do?
I agree. Despite my criticisms, as always, it's a fun film and worth watching for sure. Watch it.
It is. Well, I guess that was Redheaded Woman, Brad. Thank you, Megan, for your suggestion. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I know you're dying of the heat over there in Spain, and it's pretty damn hot here, Brad.
Yes, listener, just so you know, how much we love you, we have to turn off our air conditioning, and it's the middle of the summer, because otherwise you'd hear a loud hum. So we are willing to do that for you.
We are, but I can't take it much more. I'm schwitzing here. I'm schwitzing. So I only have one more thing left to say, but I don't want to say it. I actually do. So let's not say goodbye. Let's just say au revoir.
Now, let's say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.
That's all, folks.